All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to unpack a really powerful idea from a recent sermon that gets to the heart of a struggle I think so many of us feel. It's all about why our best efforts, our hard work, can sometimes feel like they just lead to, well, nothing. And it offers a pretty surprising key to unlocking a totally different outcome.
I mean, have you ever been there? You are putting in the work. You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, but the result just isn't there. It's frustrating. You're trying to build something good, maybe in your job, with your family, in your own faith, and it just feels like you're spinning your wheels. This quote from the sermon just hits home, doesn't it? We all grow up hearing some version of this idea, that if you just put in the sweat, you're guaranteed to get the reward. But then life happens. We face setbacks that make no sense, and the results, they just don't seem to match the effort we put in. It's confusing, and honestly, it can even shake your faith. So what's going on? What are we missing?
Well, according to this sermon, the answer isn't about just grinding harder. It's about understanding a much deeper principle. And believe it or not, it's a secret that's kind of hidden in plain sight inside a single ancient Hebrew word that totally reframes how we look at effort and reward.
Okay, so the word is Ekev. Now, on the surface, its meaning in the Torah is pretty straightforward. It's a conditional word. It basically means if or as a consequence of. You know, if you do these things, then God will do his part. Simple cause and effect, right? But that's not the whole story. Not even close. And here's the twist. Here's the aha moment. Ekev has a second meaning. It also means heel. And just think about what your heel does for a second. It's the lowest part of your body. We don't really give it much thought. But it supports your entire weight. It's what grounds you, and it's what literally propels you forward with every single step you take.
And this is where it all clicks into place. The sermon argues that the real, lasting results in life, they don't come from the big, heroic, flashy gestures. They come from the Ekev, the small, consistent, foundational things. The daily choices, the quiet acts of integrity, the little moments of obedience. These are the heel. They're the humble, often unseen actions that actually support your entire life and move you forward into those promised consequences.
Okay, so if these small actions are the key, then what guides them? How are we supposed to know which steps to take, especially when the world is just so loud and pulling us in a million different directions? The sermon uses this fantastic metaphor. It says living in the modern world is like being trapped in a room of mirrors. You've got social media over here, the news cycle over there, 1,000 different voices all reflecting these distorted, confusing images of what's good, what's right, what's valuable. It's chaotic, and it's nearly impossible to know which way is up. So how do you escape a room of mirrors? You need to find something that isn't a reflection. You need something solid, something absolute. The solution offered in the sermon is to view the Torah not just as a book of old rules, but as a blueprint for life. Think of it like the architect's original plans for how reality is supposed to work. And this is absolutely crucial. A blueprint only works if you follow it exactly as it's written. The second you start thinking, I'll just add a little here, or I don't really like this part, so I'll take it out, the whole structure becomes unstable. The argument is that to find your footing in that chaotic room of mirrors, you have to hold on tight to this original, unaltered design. So we're left with two clear paths. You've got the world's path, which is always shouting, hey, look over here, chase this new thing, it's better, it's faster, it's shinier. And then you have what the prophet Jeremiah called the ancient path, which isn't about finding something new, but about returning to God's original design. It's a choice between what the sermon calls the real and the illusions. So what happens when you actually commit to this ancient path, when you start practicing the Ekev principle? Well, the sermon describes the result not as some kind of transactional reward you earn, but as an inevitable overflow. And to really get this, we have to look at one more Hebrew word. It's barak, which we translate as blessing. But, you guessed it, just like Ekev, there are layers here that completely change the game.
Okay, check this out. Barak means to bless, sure, but its root also points to the act of kneeling, a posture of humility and submission. And metaphorically, it can even refer to a reservoir, a pool that collects and holds water. The sermon connects these dots so beautifully. Blessing isn't just something you beg for. It's what happens when you kneel, when you align yourself with the blueprint. Your life becomes like that reservoir, positioned in just the right way to naturally fill up and overflow.
And we're not talking about a little trickle either. The sermon drives home the point by referencing that biblical principle of sowing and reaping, where the return is never one for one. It's exponential. It's 30, 60, even 100 times what was sown. It's this vision of just overwhelming abundance that comes naturally when a life is aligned with the design. Now, this all sounds really good in theory, right? But what does it look like when the rubber meets the road, when you're faced with a real, modern-day, high-stakes dilemma? The sermon gives us a perfect, powerful story. So a young man comes to the pastor, and he is just torn apart. He says, "Pastor, I want to honor the Sabbath. It's a core part of the blueprint. But my job requires me to work on that day. If I quit, I'll have no money, I'll starve." From a purely worldly point of view, his fear is completely logical. He's staring at what he thinks is reality inside that room of mirrors. And the pastor's response? Man, it just brings everything we've been talking about right into focus. He tells the young man that making that choice, choosing the blueprint over what looks like reality, that is the act of faith. That one decision, that small, terrifying step of obedience, that is Ekev. That is the moment you put your heel on the ground and propel yourself into God's promised consequence. And that really brings the whole thing right back to us, doesn't it? This isn't about some massive, life-shattering change you have to make overnight. It's about the heel. It's about the small, foundational, maybe even scary step of obedience that the blueprint is calling you to take right now. So the question is, what is that one small step that, for you, is Ekev?